Hey there, I'm Leslie, co-founder of Newsletter Glue, and in this video, I'd like to introduce to you our brand new newsletter editor. Our newsletter editor sits separately from the post editor, which is probably where you've been writing your blog posts and your newsletters at the same time. In this video, I'll be showing you how you can add a new newsletter and giving you a tour around our new newsletter editor. I'll also show you how you can add a newsletter pattern, which works as a template which lets you consistently create newsletters really quickly. Let's get to it. Before we get started, I just want to mention that the existing features stay exactly the same, so you can keep going to posts and add new to write your newsletters. What the new newsletter editor features do is separate the blog posts from the newsletters, so this gives you a lot more control over your newsletter writing experience. This means less plugin conflicts, a more intuitive editor, and also a whole bunch of new newsletter features that we're able to add because we've now separated newsletters from the blog editor. So with that, let's dive in. To begin with, let's go for a quick tour of the new features. In the left-hand admin bar, you'll now be able to see Newsletters, Beta, which is where all the new features are sitting, as well as the old ones which are now housed under Settings. Right now, you're in All Newsletters, and this shows a list of all the newsletters you've written with the newsletter editor. So in your case, there shouldn't be any newsletters here since this is a new feature. To add a new newsletter, you can simply click on Add New Newsletter or Add Newsletter. As you can see, you get taken to a newsletter editor that looks very similar to the block editor when you write a new blog post. I'll go into a bit more detail with that later on, but for now, let's go back to the tour. The next thing I want to talk about is templates and styles. So if you click on this, you'll be taken to a list of patterns. Later on, we'll have more than just patterns. We'll also include reusable blocks and templates, but for now, this is what we have. To add a new pattern, you can click on Add New, and this will take you to a similar editor to the newsletter editor. Just like the last time, I'll talk a little bit more about how you create patterns and what they do later on. And for now, let's go back to the patterns list. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about is settings. So here we are in the settings page, and you can see email defaults, which you're probably already familiar with, and Connect is now housed under settings as well as newsletter blocks. The newsletter theme designer remains an important part to how you design and customize your newsletter. And in fact, the newsletter editor as well as the pattern editor now reflect customizations you've chosen in the newsletter theme designer rather than the designs that your blog theme comes with. So this is another example of how separating the newsletter from the blog lets us give you a more intuitive newsletter editing experience. So now that we're done with the tour, let me show you how you can actually use the new features by using them myself. I'll first create a newsletter pattern and then use it in a new newsletter. So let's go. You can think of patterns as pre-designed templates for your newsletter. So once you've built them, you can drag and drop them into the newsletter editor and have a consistent look without having to rebuild from scratch every single time. So here's the pattern that we're going to create. I'm just going to click on Edit so that we can check it out. The title of the pattern is the name of the pattern, and this isn't going to show up in the pattern itself. So this template has a logo, some metadata, as well as an introduction so people know who we are and why we're writing to them. I've also included a write heading block as well as a regular paragraph block. So when you add this pattern into the newsletter editor, it will automatically have this preloaded as well. I've also included a post embed block, and even though there aren't any links in here, I've already formatted it to the way that I want. And so this just makes writing the actual newsletter as simple as dropping the links in here. I sign off the newsletter with an author byline, so that's me, my name, my designation. And right underneath that, I have a before you go block, and this is made with a call out block. And this gives people the option to forward the newsletter, get 15% off if they aren't already customers, or find us on Twitter or read past issues. And this is just a nice way to continue the relationship if people are already enjoying reading your newsletter. In the not too distant future, we'll also be adding the ability to add unsubscribe links and your mailing address to the bottom of the newsletter. For now, let's get to work recreating this newsletter. So we'll head back to Templates and Styles and click on Add New. Let's first name this pattern. So looking at our example pattern, the first thing I want to do is create 2 columns to create this block. On the left-hand side, I'm going to add an image. Let's go to Media Library. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to add metadata. So in my case, I don't need all of the metadata shown here, so I'm just going to hide some of them. Okay, so this looks close to what we want. Now let's format it a bit. If you can see that this arrow is kind of overflowing onto the next line, and that's because we have the column set to 50% and 50%. So let me just click on this column, oops, and set the width to 30% instead. And this gives enough space for the metadata. Okay, so pretty happy with that. I'm gonna save the draft before I forget, and let's keep going. Okay, so next I want this section, so I'm just gonna copy and paste it over actually to save us some time. So it's just a paragraph, and I want it to be a bit smaller, so let's go 16, 15. Okay, 15 looks good. And great news, it's now possible to select the predefined options from the color settings. So if you select a light gray, or let me just show you a more extreme example. So let's select this green, which is horrible, I know, but let me just show you how it looks. So let me just save draft and open preview email in browser. And you can see it now shows up as green. So if you recall, these colors didn't used to work because of how CSS was rendered, but we've now managed to turn this all into inline CSS. And so you can simply click on the predefined colors and they now work. So obviously we don't want to stick with green. Let's go back to gray and let's keep moving. Okay, so we want a line. And let's add a heading and a paragraph. Turn that into a heading. Okay, so now we have our heading and our paragraph. We now want to create a post embed. So let's add post embeds block. And in order to format it correctly, we want to add a link first so that we can actually see what we're doing. So let me just go ahead and add 2 links. Okay, so here are the 2 links. So let's make some changes. The first is I want it to be 50-50. So we have the image on the left and the text on the side. I don't want the date to show since it's not important to me, so I'm removing that. And the rest of it actually looks good. So I'm just going to keep it looking like this. Actually, let's go ahead and add 1 pixel thickness to each post. That looks good to me. Okay, cool. So I'm happy with how this looks. And obviously, since I don't want these posts showing up every single time I use the pattern, I just want the formatting, the style to show up. I'm going to go ahead and delete these posts. Okay, so now I have the post embed formatted the way I want. Let's keep moving. So now we want to add the author byline, so let's do that. It shows up as Leslie automatically because that's what my username for this website is, but I want to just change it so that it looks a bit more official, and let's enter a description. Okay, so I don't actually want my follow button over here because I'm going to be talking about my Twitter later on, so let's go ahead and turn that off. Okay, so this is how the author byline looks like right now. It's my sign off. I'm pretty happy with that. So let's look at what I have to do next. Okay, so finally we have this before you go section. I'm just gonna copy the whole thing and head back to our template that we're building right now. Before we add the text, I want to add a callout card, which is another custom block. So here's the callout card, And let me just paste. Okay, so I've added the callout card and I've pasted the content inside it. So it looks like we're done. This is our newsletter pattern that we're going to be using for our newsletter. And if you recall, we already clicked on preview email in browser and that tab is over here. So let me go ahead and refresh. Cool. So here you can see our pattern. This is how it looks. Obviously a bunch of things are missing because there isn't any information there. They're just placeholders, which is exactly what we want. So here are the 3 placeholders which I'm talking about, and that's the heading, paragraph, and post embed block. The last thing we're going to do is add some space to the top because right now this pattern is uncomfortably close to the top of the page. And so we'll do that by adding a space over here and looking for the spacer block. So let's move this to, say, 50 pixels, which I think will look comfortable. Let's save it and refresh. Great. Okay, so this is exactly how we want it. So let's go ahead and publish this new block and use it later on. Okay, so you can see our new pattern over here. And what we're going to do now is add a new newsletter. So here's our new newsletter. Let's add a title. And rather than having to build our entire newsletter from scratch, we're going to go over here to this blue button and click on the Patterns tab. And over here you can see we have uncategorized and full. So for now, we're going to click on this uncategorized pattern, which is the pattern that we just built. Awesome. So you can see that the pattern loads immediately onto the newsletter editor, and we don't have to make any changes and we don't have to worry about accidentally overriding anything. If you're a power user of Newsletter Glue, you're probably already using reusable blocks, and I hope you can see how using patterns is a much better workflow instead. So let's add a header here. So we'll make it the same as the top one over here. Okay, so we've written our heading as well as our paragraph and information. Let's add some posts. Cool. So I hope you can see how the formatting that we selected earlier on with the pattern is now showing up over here, so we don't have to recreate it every single time. Actually, our newsletter is done. So pretty much everything that we need to do is only in the middle section. Oh, one last thing we have to do is add the issue number. So I'm gonna write 1. Okay, and with that, our newsletter is done. We've updated the issue number, we've written the content, which is right in here, and everything else is done for us. And let's save the draft and preview email in browser. Great, everything is showing up exactly how it should. Now let's send the test email so that you have an idea of how it'll look. Awesome, so our test email just came in and this is how it looks. We've got everything formatted just the way we want it, and I'm pretty happy with this. And that's it. Thanks for staying till the end. You should now know how to create your own newsletter pattern and use it in our brand new newsletter editor. If you run into any problems at all, feel free to email us at support@newsletterglue.com and we'll be happy to help you out. Lastly, we've still got a whole bunch of new features planned for the newsletter editor, and I can't wait to show them to you. See you in the next video.